Hello, Discover here to explain our cash back match. Here's how it works. We give you cash back for using your Discover card on the things you were going to buy anyway. Then we match that cash back in your first year. And that's why we call it Cashback Match. Now to recap and say cashback one more time. We match all the cash back you've earned at the end of your first year automatically. Discover. Exceptionally common sense. Learn more at discover.com/match. Limitations apply.
Gearheads know that some projects need so many parts, it feels like you need a whole storage unit just to store them. That's what eBay Motors' 122 million parts are for. Think of it as your virtual parts garage. They've always got the right fitment at the right prices. Use the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.
Hey everyone, this is the Almost World Podcast. Bringing to you mind-blowing interviews with guests from all over the world. So settle down, relax, and enjoy the show. Oh yeah, by the way, if you like the podcast, please support Elmo's World Podcast on Patreon. Your support is what helps the podcast improve more and more. Welcome to Elmo's World Podcast. This is Elmo Odor Jr., your host, and I am with my friend Leo. He is a Qualia centric rationalist geek. But can you tell us something more about yourself?
Sure. So thanks for having me for part two. Well, last time I was explaining Qualia-centric as being my center for ethics or morality or values, and rationalist, although then we discussed epistemology and rationality, that would be kind of my second part. Rationalist is my methodology. Encompasses how I try to analyze, think about the world, skepticism, how I approach to reach conclusions. We said evidentialism was my methodology, epistemology, and geek, because I geek out, because I love so many things, from science to technology to sci-fi to games to memes. To just there's so much creative, brilliant stuff out there, and I wish we could just enjoy that, more of it.
Yeah. I love sci-fi movies. But so, last time we talked about mostly metaphysics and cosmology and how to analyze epistemology and how to analyze claims, But I want to talk about values, axiology, and when you live, because you're an atheist, and how do you derive like when you say like policy or what you should value, ethics, or morality, ethics, stuff like that? Well, can you bring it down?
So you can reference the previous discussion of saying that different claims are based on one another, and I'm gonna say I want 2 points. First of all, the first point is if we want to understand how to be moral or ethical, the first thing we need to do is define it. If we have a definition of morality, then we can discuss it. If we don't have a definition of morality, then we can't discuss it, and we don't know what we're talking about, literally. So that's the first point that I want to say. And we didn't discuss so much about how we create definitions or types of definitions, because not all definitions are the same. We have extrinsic and intrinsic definitions. We have definitions that we invent. Best example is Harry Potter and Quidditch. Quidditch is a brilliant sport that no one's ever seen or heard or played, because it's totally invented. So it's a very subjective, kind of invented out of the mind of one person. If there's a rule that is new that isn't written in the book now, we have to go back to that source of authority, that one person who created it out of her mind, to basically see what the rules should be. It's very subjective to her. She invented it. And that's what subjective means, from a specific one person's perspective. Or we can look at extrinsic definitions when we point about something that is external to ourselves. Something that we see, like if I look at a tree and I say, okay, what is that? I'm pointing at it. How do I define it? It's complicated. I mean, it's got bark, it's got leaves, and I have to define bark and leaves. And it grows, it doesn't move. It does with the wind, or it grows, but slowly. It takes nutrients. It's got a whole internal mechanism. It's a complicated organism. And I can try to reach the best definition descriptor I can, so that when I point at it, I basically use a label, tree, and everyone understands in their mind the concept I'm referring to. And so when I use the term moral, what is it? Is it a concept I've invented, or someone invented, one specific person invented? Or is it an idea, a concept that we're pointing to, that we're trying to identify, that we're referencing, that is extrinsic to us, that we're trying to get a better and better, closer definition, understanding of?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an extrinsic concept, because we talk about it all the time, right?
Yeah. Okay.
We reference it when we talk about so many things. We talk about slavery and we say it's not moral. And we say, why isn't it moral?
But can I clarify
about,
something though? When you say
Yeah.
extrinsic, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's objective, but it's just that.
Right. So okay, so that was actually coming to the second point I wanted to point out, the difference. A few different terms I wanted to clarify. So I tried to clarify intrinsic and extrinsic. So intrinsic would be subjective and extrinsic would be objective. But there's also a difference between absolute and contingent. So an absolute claim would be, this is it always, in every single case. Contingent would mean that it depends on the circumstances. Now, I think morality is extrinsic, objective, but contingent, not absolute. So I want to try and clarify and explain to you how I reached that conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So first, I want to look at all the cases in which I see us discussing morality and ethics. And people discuss it over time. Let's say, for example, right, people were discussing, nowadays we're talking about things like abortion, or we're talking about things like veganism. And we're trying to say, okay, is it moral or immoral? Should we force everyone to be vegan? And we're trying to identify what is the moral action to take. And different people bring out different actions, different examples. And they say, well, people who are vegan are saying animals are sentient entities that suffer, and we have an obligation and duty to protect them. And other people are saying, well, you can't force people, and animals don't suffer that much, and maybe they want it or maybe they don't, we don't know. Either way, we need it for nutrition, and it will harm our economy. When we talk about abortions, what are the arguments that people bring? Some people say, well, it's a living baby and it needs to be protected. And others are saying, well, no, you are taking away the woman's rights. You are enslaving her to her body You are objectifying her. So, whatever side on the morality you fall, first of all, let's realize what it is we're doing here. We're making an appeal to harms. We are showing, we're talking about suffering, some kind of wrong, right? When I say wrong, there is damage to our economy. People will suffer because of that damage. The animals are in pain and suffering. We have an obligation to prevent that suffering. The woman is being objectified and taken, her agency, her qualia, her rights are being taken away. The baby is being killed. It is being harmed and injured. So the claims are always towards harms being done. No matter what side you are, the appeal is towards harms. We can analyze that. Once we first of all agree, or when we talk about morality, we're effectively talking about concern over well-being. That's what we're making an appeal to.
But can I say something though?
Sure.
Some would say that it's not just harm, but it's essentially with agency, I guess, individual agency.
Sure, but taking away agency is a harm, so I don't see a contradiction there.
Okay.
So again, whenever we talk about it, we're talking about experiences. We're talking about the types of experiences that people have, or the things have, sentient entities have, right? Because if I take a rock and I smash it, I'm not concerned about the rock. Why am I not concerned about smashing a rock? Because I don't believe that the rock has a nervous system, and I don't believe that the rock has agency, and I don't believe the rock has will or wishes or wants or pain or suffering. It can't experience the world, so it can't experience pain and suffering. However, if when I smash the rock that hits someone else, suddenly I do care about it because someone else was injured and hurt. So now my concern, it's not about the rock, it's about the other person that was hit. And if the rock was valuable or meaningful, and again, I don't care about the rock itself. I care about the value or meaning that it had to someone else. I care about the experience that they have as loss, losing that rock because of the value it had to them, for whatever reason. Everything we're talking about when we talk about morality, in every context that we talk about morality, comes down to this concept of experiences of sentient entities and that their well-being. And I'm not the first one to point this out by far. And you can overly simplify it, and you can reduce it to a kind of an absurd mockery of it, which many people try to do, and misrepresent it. Which I'm not, again, I'm trying to avoid. I'm not trying to give a specific answer to everything here. I'm just trying to point out that this is what we're talking about. This is the definition we're trying to get towards. And the definition could be vague right now, and we could get a better, more accurate definition with time. Like, it's really hard to define a tree. Why do we think that it has to be so easy to define morality? Right? If it's an extrinsic concept, then it's something that is outside of us that we are pointing at as a label that we are trying to clarify with time. And it's difficult to clarify it exactly in all cases. But this is the best definition we have, and we can at least see some common ground, some common terms, some common concepts starting to form that are concerned over well-being and harms. That's what we're talking about. When I talk about morality, that's what I'm referencing. So if you want to talk about a concept that isn't talking about that, sure, we can talk about it, but to what end? Like, do you just want to take the word to use it in some other context, or
okay? But I see something like a problem here, right? Because
go for it.
In terms of how you define things, it's ultimately subjective to how you think it is defined, right?
No. No, that's inaccurate. This is not about how I see it defined. This is about me looking at the collective uses that we as a species have used the term throughout every discussion that we've had about the term, and trying to find the common threads that unify it, the criteria that bound it to some kind of meaning. What does it mean? How does it mean that? I'm not looking at what I want it. I'm looking at how everyone so far throughout history has already used it.
But with the tools, and I guess with your presuppositions, not others.
Sure. Yes.
Okay.
Sure. But that's all I've got. I mean, that's where the discussion comes in. We can discuss that. If my perception of that is inaccurate, someone can point out, wait, here's an example that doesn't fit, and we have to discuss what happens. Does it not fit because my description was inaccurate, or does it not fit because it doesn't belong? And that's how we refine our definition.
Okay. But in terms of
that's
that,
exactly the difference between something that's
I think that how you define extrinsic is a little is problematic here, because I would define extrinsic, I'd say, like looking at the logos of the universe, its structure, its mechanics. But when we discuss,
that's problematic for me.
Okay. But when we discuss, let's say, like morality, immorality is ultimately a social construct, and how
that's a loaded concept.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because that specifically comes to
so you wouldn't say that morality is a social construct?
I personally wouldn't use that phrasing. No.
Okay, it's interesting.
Because I'm trying to remember who was the one who said that. I'm quickly looking it up. It's because it's a very specific philosophical Rousseau. That was it.
Yeah.
Social contract was a concept that was coined by Rousseau. And I mean, it's also come under criticism, like, and it's complicated because I have a very little bit of legal background, specifically in contract law, and I know it's defined differently between in different countries as well. It's not as universal as we would like it to be, but we're trying to come up with.
But you're right.
But contracts basically tend to have within them some kind of offer and acceptance, some kind of consent, and you can't force or impose consent. And to therefore say that you were born consenting is an imposition on you which cannot be forced and is in and of itself immoral, because what else can I force you to consent to?
But the thing is, though, like we are still in the process of defining what morality is, and I think that considering that it could be a social construct is one of the main factors of how we define it.
You can look at it that way. You can also ask yourself, is a social contract a description of what morality is, or a manifestation of how we justify it? And I think it's more the latter.
Well,
because when he's talking about social contract,
that's pretty biased, though, right?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe, but he's not. When he's talking about a social contract, let's say I buy into the social contract idea. What does it tell me about anything about morality?
Okay, it would imply that if morality is just a social construct, that it's
all it says is I have an obligation to other people.
I think
but
it's
it doesn't tell me.
It's not.
No, but that's the thing. It isn't. Yeah, but it isn't. That's the problem. Because all it says, social contract, is I have an obligation to other people, but it doesn't tell me what's the nature of that obligation, what form it takes. And so I could say you have an obligation to kill every second person.
But I think how you define social construct is different. Like
Right.
I think
And so
social
this is what I
construct could
mean.
apply to even just an individual defining something. That could be
Right, but
a construct.
what I'm trying to say is Rousseau is trying to legitimize why we have an obligation to be moral rather than what morality is. And I think those are two very different discussions to have. Like, what is morality? Do I want to be moral? I could understand what morality is and then turn around and say, yeah, sure, that's
Okay.
morality. I don't want to be moral.
But I think though that if we just put a pin on it, it'd say it's for another discussion. We
Sure.
could not move on from defining what morality is unless we confront that problem or issue.
What do you mean? Which problem exactly?
That as to the implications of if morality is simply descriptive rather than prescriptive. That as a social
I think it's
construct.
descriptive.
Okay.
I think it's descriptive. Right? But not because it's a social contract. Again, I want to repeat my point. Social contract, I think, is an argument, a justification why someone ought to be moral, not what morality is. It's arguing why you have an obligation to be moral, not what morality means.
But isn't the essence of morality on whether or not we have obligation? Like morality
No, it's two separate questions. No,
obligation.
those are two separate questions. No,
okay.
Those are two separate things. What is morality? First question, what does it mean? Second question, do I want to or should I follow it? Once I know what it is, I can then have a discussion with you about why we ought to do it.
But I think it goes both ways. Like we also have to answer. I think that in terms of looking at it in a holistic way, we don't just attack or at least look at morality from like attacking from the front door and then the next floor and then the next floor. I think that the whole concept itself has to bring in an objective, not objective in terms of like but I guess already an object that we can look at, and so we can derive from its nature and its implications what we can how we can define it.
Okay, so this is a great example where we can go back to the first half and utilize the tools we built that we agreed on in the first half here, where we say, okay, first of all, we have a definition. We understand what we're talking about. When we have that definition, we can look at descriptors in reality, where and where does it not apply. And then we can use those descriptors and that definition to build values and describe why we care about it, why we ought to care about it. How do we compare between different cases and scenarios and different values? We build one thing on top of another. Mm-hmm. But they are different aspects of the discussion. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to tease out the threads.
Okay. But I think that in how you would put it that way, I think that there are different models of what morality is, and we could tackle it as how you proposed by one aspect to the other.
That wouldn't be accurate. I would say there are different aspects of morality that we want to tackle, but they are different elements of it. What morality means is very different from how morality manifests in reality, is very different to why we value and want to be moral or not.
But the problem is like, which question do we have to ask first? Because
we have to start with the basic flaw. You cannot discuss how something manifests in reality without understanding what you are talking about.
Okay.
It is slightly different with an extrinsic definition, because effectively with an extrinsic definition, you're working backwards. You see a manifestation in reality. You see something happening. You see a tree, and you're trying to work out the definition for it, right? Whereas with an intrinsic, like an invented relative definition, we start with a definition, we make a definition up, and then we say, okay, how does that apply in reality? But if something exists already, then we look at what exists. We look at all the conversations that people are having about it, the arguments that people are making, the uses that people have for that label. People are referring to a concept. They're trying to apply arguments to a concept. The concept exists, and we're trying to tease apart all those uses of that concept to try and figure out, what do people mean when they use that concept? What are they referring to? Right?
Okay.
So we can
Okay.
come to an understanding of that concept.
Okay. Yeah, I think that, I agree then that we have to know what we're talking about before we know what the implications are. But I guess then in terms of the nature of morality itself, I don't think that we could directly imply from our tentative definition of it, because if we define it as this, but we could actually be wrong in how we define it, because we may
So again,
change.
we come back to but we come back to our epistemological model.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
have the best understanding of reality at the time, and with more evidence,
Okay.
we refine it and improve it
Okay.
and progress it.
In that sense,
That's how
then
knowledge
okay,
grows.
I'm good with that. With that
Evidence
methodology.
suggests that, right? That all our evidence suggests that people have desires, wishes, wants, that they change their mind, that they interact with
But the question is,
the
though,
environment in
the question
varying
is,
ways.
I have a question, though. When did we start taking these evidences like that, like I appear to have a choice, as self-evident, that in and of itself it's something that we can actually
No, it
use?
isn't self-evident. It's evidence.
How,
I have a choice is part
when
of my
did we
experience.
when did we
It is evidence.
decide?
It's like I see a dog. At what point did we decide that I see a dog is self-evident? No, I see a dog is part of the evidence. When I cumulatively see lots of dogs, I tend to accept that dogs are part of our reality.
Yeah, but how can you use
When I have
having free
cumulative-
will as evidence if you don't even know if you have free will or not? How can you use
No,
that
I
as
have my
evidence?
experience. I have my perception of it.
But what
And
is
I
that? What
have-
is that
so I
worth,
have-
though? Like you might have an experience, but
So what?
ultimately you could have and
Right.
have
So
not.
what I have. Sure, but what I have then is I can compare that with other people and interactions, and I can compare that. I can contrast that. So again, I'm pointing towards a concept that I see, and I say, okay, what's the difference between me and a rock? Because ultimately, that's what we're trying to define here when we say we have free will, right? If I take a rock and I throw it up, it's never going to move sideways. It's always going to follow the laws of physics. It's always going to fall down. It does not have a choice.
But
does not have agency.
what I think it's what's
When
happening
we say an
here,
individual,
though,
what do we mean?
What I think
When
what's
we say an
happening
individual, what do we
here
mean?
is, like, there is certain, like, you're pushing the morality subject into a specific direction that you want it to occur or to go to, and that I think that is problematic, right? Because
Maybe, but I see myself as going with it where I see it leads. I'm not the first person to make this analysis, right? I'm not the first person to make this observation, and I'm basically convinced by the observation made rather than having to analyze it for myself. Sam Harris, I think, made the case. I'm not even sure that Sam Harris is the first one to make it
with the moral landscape,
right? But he was definitely one of those who, the moral landscape, he's definitely popularized it. Which again doesn't mean I agree with everything he says. I don't have to.
Yeah. Okay.
To agree with, well, actually, this is a definition that's probably true. That's enough. That's all I have to agree with. It's the only claim I have to agree with. He's pointed out a definition.
I
that
think
we
then
commonly use.
when you use that explanation, and I would say it's an excuse. Like when you came into the theological stance, but there are things that we do not know or that would seem problematic. It to me it would be inconsistent that you don't have the same criterion for where you're taking morality or its definitions and the two other
No,
categories upwards. I think it's what you're doing though.
again, I don't think so. I think that the frame of morality that we have is based on the evidence that we have. Our evidence currently suggests that there is a distinction between us and a rock. A rock follows specific laws. We can choose whether we want to go with gravity or against it to some extent. Like we can go left or right. When even a tree grows towards light always, right? It doesn't suddenly choose to go away from it. We can choose to suddenly self-harm, mutilate, commit suicide, be with friends, different friends, choose, right? I want to have tea, I want to have coffee, I want to have water, I want to have juice. We make choices every day that are not directly laid out in front of us. Those are choices. Those are valid. That's what we talk about, a distinction between us and any inanimate object.
But I completely agree with the methodology, and how it might be logical with how you present it and analyze it. But I think essentially the problem here is that, for example, when you you having free will, but we don't know that you do, whether you do or not. When you use that as evidence, there is the problem is because you've simply taken taken A and not or B into the equation, and then you've led the ladder upwards on only A, that we do have free will, but not on B.
What I'm saying is I'm looking at all the evidence that we have, and I'm taking all the evidence that we have, and I'm saying, based on the evidence that we have, this is the model we use. This is the right. If in the future we get more information, we can always modify it and adjust it to the new information.
Okay.
If in the future you show me that a rock is sentient, the rock has wishes or feels pain, well, I'll have to reevaluate my understanding of morality and my obligation and concern towards rocks. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Until you don't show me, based on the evidence I currently have, they don't have, and that's a distinction between us and rocks.
Okay, but coming back,
there's a difference in my concern between us and rocks.
I think one last question though, because I think that I have the same question in terms of the last episode. You say that this is the best model we have, but the question is, do you think that just because we have the best model, given the based on evidence that we have, means that it is the model that we should have? That is the question.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, what's the point of using the worst model or a lesser good model? I mean, we have a specific task objective that we've set to most accurately model reality, to identify truth. Let's say I have two models, two different tools. One can accurately predict reality 70% of the time. That means 30% of the time it will be wrong, but 70% it will be right. Have another tool that can do it 50% of the time, 50-50. But that means 50% of the time it will be wrong. Which tool do I use? My objective is to be as accurate as possible. Of course, I use the one that's 70% accurate.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it doesn't mean that it will always be accurate, but it's definitely better than the one that's 50-50. It's better. So yeah, that's the tool we use. If I could tweak it and improve it and make it 80% accurate, 90% accurate, sure, no one's against that. Absolutely, let's do that. But there's no reason to take something that's 50% or 30% accurate.
But I think then that the crux there is, what is my motivation in pursuing this? Defining, because if my only motivation was to pursue truth itself, like binary objective truth, then the best to me, like the best model would still be insufficient. Would you agree? If
it's the best that we have.
Yeah,
so
but if you're purely
looking
for 0 or 1, like right or wrong, 100% correct.
Sure, you can cry about it all you want. You can say, why am I not a billionaire? You're not. Tough. Yeah.
Okay.
This is the best we have. This is the best we have. I want a quantum computer. If it doesn't exist, it doesn't matter how much I want
then there's a
right?
pragmatism applied here.
I use the best computer that I've got, right? The tools that I have is what I have. That's part of reality.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and I use the best.
You could use it, but you still don't have.
Sure.
You can't say that you already have it. The truth itself.
No, but you can say with 70% degrees of confidence, or 90% degree confidence, or whatever degrees of confidence, and that's something that science actually does all the time. Gives things degrees of confidence. How certain are we about something? Science is the best, one of the only methods we have, if not the only method that we have.
Well, Leo, I'd like you to make your closing statement, because it's been awesome conversing with you, man, and I've learned a lot. Like I really considered a lot of things, and thank you for that. And I hope the audience does as well. And I'm happy to admit that I might have been wrong and flawed in some of my positions that I take. And thank you so much. But is there anything that you want to say? To close it.
Well, I mean, I hope it's useful for people. I hope they enjoy. If you wanted to do a third podcast at some point about a different topic, we could try to continue it.
Awesome. Yeah, dude, I would love to.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, I will leave it up to you.
Okay. Well, Leo, thank you so much for your time.
Take care to your audience.
I've taken already 3 hours of your time, but bye, man. I'll upload it later.
No problem.
Okay.
Take care.
Goodbye.
Bye.
So that's the end of it. Thanks for tuning in, guys. This is your host, Elmo Ador Jr. And thank you for listening in. And please subscribe. Please follow us on Facebook. Please follow this. Please. Thanks.
Shop Mattress Firm's year-end sale and put an end to junk sleep. Save up to $500 when you get a king bed for the price of a queen or queen for a twin. Plus, get a free adjustable base with qualifying Sealy purchase up to a $499 value. Or shop top-selling brands and get up to 50% off select mattresses, like Sealy twin mattresses starting at $224.99 or Serta twin mattresses at $349.99. And shop with confidence thanks to our low price guarantee. Only at Mattress Firm. Restrictions apply. See store for details.
Gearheads know that some projects need so many parts, it feels like you need a whole storage unit just to store them. That's what eBay Motors' 122 million parts are for. Think of it as your virtual parts garage. They've always got the right fitment at the right prices. Use the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.